What kind of billionaire fires a girl in front of a full ballroom? And what kind of girl shows up a week later, at his board meeting, wearing the rival family's crest? When Richard Vale threw a tantrum over spilled champagne at the Crestmore Gala, he didn't know the delivery girl he humiliated was Juliet Lark, the estranged daughter of the man trying to buy out his entire company. He didn't know he'd just made a powerful enemy, and he definitely didn't expect to fall in love with her. But when revenge mixes with attraction and legacy collides with truth, everything can break. Stay with this story, because what she does next, it doesn't just flip the script, it threatens to burn the script to ash. The Crestmore Hotel shimmered like polished crystal under the Chicago skyline. Inside, the East Wing ballroom buzzed with whispered deals, clinking glasses, and old money watching itself sparkle. At the center of it all, beneath chandeliers the size of cars, stood Richard Vale. At 39, he was both admired and feared. The kind of man who didn't just play the game, he made the board. CEO of Vale Industries. Harvard alum. Cold strategist. The press called him the silent reaper of Wall Street. But tonight, something was off. His eyes weren't scanning the room for threats. They were locked on a linen stain. "Is this a joke?" he snapped, lifting his jacket sleeve, now dripping with champagne. A server stumbled back. Not a server. A delivery girl in a black apron. Hair in a loose braid. Nervous hands. I'm so sorry, I was told to drop the package." "You dropped your job," Richard said coolly, snapping his fingers for security. "This is a private event. Remove her." There was a silence you could pour wine through. The girl didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just looked at him, calm, unreadable, and said, "Big mistake." Then she was gone. He thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 7 days later, inside Vale Industries headquarters, the tension was thick. The boardroom on the 47th floor echoed with the hum of legal nerves and cold coffee. Richard stood at the head of the table, waiting for the new partner to arrive. The Lark family, his company's largest competitor, had forced the board to approve an oversight merger. Their rep was due at noon. The elevator pinged. Everyone turned. And in walked the same woman he'd had thrown out of the gala. But tonight, she wore a cream silk blouse, tailored navy slacks, diamond pins shaped like a falcon, the Lark family crest. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "I'm Juliet Lark. Pleased to finally meet you." "Mr. Vale." Gasps. A dropped pen. One executive swore under his breath. Richard's jaw didn't move, but his eyes did, and for the first time in years, he blinked. Richard didn't speak. Not at first. The board members shifted in their seats, pretending not to glance at him. Juliet stood at the far end of the table, perfectly still, like a queen making her opening move. She wasn't the same girl he dismissed a week ago, and yet, her eyes hadn't changed. Still steady, still unshaken. If anything, she looked amused. "I take it this arrangement is unexpected," Juliet said, lips curving into something between a smile and a challenge. Richard finally exhaled through his nose. "Unexpected," he said, "is one word for it." Daniel Crest, the board's legal advisor, jumped in to break the silence. "The Lark family has leveraged their stake in the satellite division. Juliet has full voting rights and project clearance. So she's not here to apologize," Richard said flatly. Juliet pulled out the chair across from him. "I never do." Another beat passed. Richard tilted his head, analyzing her like he would a chessboard. "You knew who I was at the gala." "I did. And you set me up?" Juliet raised an eyebrow. "You spilled your own drink, Mr. Vale. I just didn't get out of the way fast enough." A few board members coughed awkwardly. One snorted before choking it down. The room tensed again when Richard didn't respond. Instead, he turned to Daniel. "Clear the room." "What?" someone said. "Now." When the boardroom emptied, the air grew thinner. Juliet leaned back in her chair, eyes locked on his. "You gonna throw me out again?" "I should," Richard muttered. "But you won't." He narrowed his gaze. "Why not?" "Because I'm not just a threat anymore," she said. "I'm a solution. Don't flatter yourself." "Oh, I'm not. I'm here to watch you. Audit you. Decide if you're worth saving or if this company gets gutted." She stood, slowly circling the room. "You've built something powerful, Richard. Cold, but brilliant. But there's rot under the marble. And I'm here to clean it out." Richard stood too, crossing his arms. "You're bluffing. This is a stunt." Juliet leaned in slightly, her voice low. "I was raised in this world, Vale. You just conquered it. I was born inside it. Don't confuse the two." For a moment, neither said a word. Then, with surprising calm, she added, "You wanted war when you humiliated me. Now you've got it." She walked to the door, paused, then turned back. "But here's the problem with starting fires," she said. "Sometimes you burn down things you didn't mean to. Sometimes you end up liking the heat." She left, and for the first time in a decade, Richard Vale had no idea what his next move should be. Across the street, in the back of a black town car, Juliet removed the falcon pin and stared out the window. Her phone buzzed. A message from her father. "Report." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she whispered to herself. Let's see what kind of man he really is. The next morning, Juliet arrived at Vale Industries at exactly 8 a.m. She didn't come quietly. Her heels echoed through the marble lobby. Not rushed, not hesitant, just deliberate, like she belonged there, which now she did. Richard stood by the espresso bar in the executive wing when she stepped off the elevator. He looked her up and down. Silk blouse, minimal makeup, no apology. You're early, he said. She glanced at his untouched coffee. You're predictable. He smirked. Still planning to clean out my company? Still deciding if it deserves to survive, she replied, eyes scanning the framed accolades behind him. He leaned in just slightly. You always this charming before a hostile takeover? Only with men who mistake control for character. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. We'll see how long that mask holds. Juliet turned away. If I'm wearing a mask, Mr. Vale, you handed me the script. She walked off, heels tapping like a countdown. And Richard, despite himself, watched her go. By noon, Juliet had already interviewed half the division heads. She took notes, listened more than she spoke. But beneath that calm exterior, her thoughts were fire. Richard Vale was sharper than she expected, less vain, more dangerous. Not because he was ruthless, but because something in him felt familiar. A kind of loneliness you don't admit to out loud. Later that day, Juliet sat alone in her temporary office overlooking the river. She scrolled headlines on her tablet. Lark heiress joins rival empire, corporate espionage or power play. Juliet Lark spotted at Vale HQ. War of the Tycoons begins. She sighed. This wasn't the plan. The original strategy was simple. Gain access, gather intel, dismantle his empire from within. But what she hadn't accounted for was how human he was, or how sharp his silence could cut. Her phone buzzed again, another message from her father. Need update. Don't lose focus. She set it down without replying. In the glass reflection, she saw herself. Hair slightly out of place. Eyes tired, but steady. Not the girl Richard humiliated. Not the heiress her father expected. Someone else. Someone in between. Downstairs, Richard stood alone in the boardroom, reviewing her audit notes. She was digging deep. Too deep. But what bothered him more than her investigation was how much he looked forward to their next argument. By Thursday, the entire executive wing was buzzing. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. Juliet Lark wasn't just observing. She was circling something. Departments got nervous. VP meetings shortened. And Richard Vale? He watched it all without blinking, until she called a private meeting with him. 11 o'clock, her email said. Conference room C. No assistants. No distractions. He arrived at 10:59. She was already there, leaning against the table, sleeves rolled, a folder in one hand. You've been busy, he said, taking the seat across from her. Juliet didn't smile. She slid the folder toward him. I found a pattern in the infrastructure budget. Someone's laundering money through a shell vendor. He raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Juliet leaned forward. 3 years. Quiet siphoning. Not enough to crash the system, just enough to rot it from inside. You think I don't know what goes on under my own roof? She paused. I think you've been too distracted maintaining your image to see the cracks. That one landed. He leaned back slowly. So what? You want me to thank you for doing my job? No, she said. I want you to do it better. She stood and crossed her arms. You want to protect your legacy? Start acting like it. For a second, he didn't respond. Then something shifted in his eyes. You ever think you'd be this good at war? He asked. She tilted her head. This isn't war, Richard. Not yet. But keep underestimating me. He didn't finish the sentence. Neither did she. They just stood there, the silence charged, almost electric. That night, Juliet didn't go home. She walked the river instead, heels dangling from one hand, city lights flickering off the water. Her father's latest message sat unread on her phone. You're not there to fix him. You're there to break him. But the problem was, she wasn't sure she wanted to. Back at Vale HQ, Richard sat alone in his office, still staring at her folder. Someone on his team had been bleeding the company dry. She was right. And yet, all he could think about was the way she said his name like she'd already survived him. At 1:47 a.m., Juliet finally opened the message from her father. She didn't respond. Instead, she opened a blank file, titled it Phase 2, and wrote just one line. What if the target is more human than expected? The following Monday, Juliet walked into Vale Industries with one goal, distance. She needed to pull back. Recenter. Forget the sharpness of his voice, the weight of his stare, the way he listened like no one ever had. But fate had other plans. As she stepped into her office, a package was waiting on her desk. No name. No card. Just a black leather box. Inside, a first edition copy of The Art of War, her favorite book. Tucked inside the front cover was a note in neat handwriting. You fight like someone who reads between the lines. Thought you'd appreciate the original translation. R. She stared at it for a long time before placing it in a drawer. Not out of rejection. Out of fear that she didn't want to throw it away. Meanwhile, in his office 2 floors up, Richard reviewed the updated infrastructure report Juliet had flagged. She was good. Too good. He couldn't ignore it anymore. She wasn't here to play chess. She was here to rewrite the rules. But she hadn't leaked anything. She hadn't used what she'd found to take him down. Not yet. So what was she waiting for? That afternoon, Juliet met with Andrea Lark, her cousin and silent partner in the Lark family firm. They sat at an outdoor cafe, Juliet still in her Veil Industries badge, Andrea in dark glasses and sharper questions. "You're losing sight of the objective," Andrea said, voice low. "No," Juliet replied. "I'm seeing it more clearly than ever. He's manipulating you." "Is he?" Juliet sipped her espresso. "Because if this is manipulation, he's bad at it." Andrea leaned in. "You used to be ruthless. Now you're writing reports and drinking his coffee." Juliet didn't flinch. "I'm gathering data. You're falling for a man you were sent to dismantle." Silence. Then Juliet whispered, "I think I'm falling for a man no one ever really bothered to understand." Andrea stood without finishing her drink. "If you won't pull the trigger," she said coldly, "someone else will." Back at headquarters, Richard watched surveillance footage of the lobby. He saw Andrea. Saw Juliet with her. He zoomed in. And for the first time, he let himself ask, "Who exactly are you?" That night, Juliet found a sealed envelope slipped under her apartment door. Inside was a photo. Richard. Her. Andrea. Captured outside the cafe. And scribbled in red marker across the top. "Choose carefully. You only get one betrayal." Juliet stared at the photo in her hands. Someone had followed them. Tracked her. Printed this. But it wasn't the surveillance that chilled her. It was the handwriting. She knew it. Andrea. The message wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. "Choose carefully. You only get one betrayal." Juliet slipped the photo into a folder, locked it in a drawer, and sat down slowly. This wasn't just corporate chess anymore. This was personal. And the board was shrinking. The next morning, she walked into Veil Industries with her mask fully on. Immaculate blazer. Tight ponytail. Expression unreadable. But the second she stepped into the elevator, Richard was already inside. Just the two of them. The doors closed. "You've been quiet," he said. "I've been busy." He studied her. Coffee. No time. A pause. The air between them dense with things unspoken. "You were seen with someone yesterday," he said casually. "A woman. Blonde. Sunglasses. Ring on her right hand." Juliet's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "You have surveillance running on me?" "I have surveillance running on my company. You happen to be in it." She turned her head. "You don't trust me." "I don't trust anyone," he said. "That's why I'm still standing." Another beat passed. Then she looked at him fully. "You should try trusting someone. Once." The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Neither moved. "Was she family?" he asked quietly. Juliet didn't answer. Not with words. She stepped out and said, "Depends on the definition." That afternoon, Richard met with Daniel, his chief advisor. "Have Juliet Lark fully vetted," he said, dropping her file on the table. Daniel hesitated. "You sure?" "You've been letting her in." "That's the problem," Richard muttered. "I don't know what I've let in." Meanwhile, Juliet stood on the balcony of the executive lounge, watching the city burn gold under the setting sun. Her phone buzzed. This time, it wasn't Andrea. It was her father. "End it now. You're compromised." She didn't respond. Instead, she scrolled back through old texts. Messages she never replied to. Promises she'd stopped believing in. And then she typed, "What if I wasn't sent here to end him? What if I was sent here to understand what none of you ever did?" She didn't hit send. She just stared at the blinking cursor. Downstairs, Richard reviewed her employment file. Except it didn't add up. Dates were too clean. Gaps hidden by credentials. It was polished, but too polished. Then he found it. A detail no one else noticed. A photo from a university gala 5 years ago. In the background, her. Different name. Same eyes. Same smirk. And suddenly, he wasn't sure if he'd fallen for a woman with secrets. Or into a trap carefully crafted from the start. Juliet barely stepped into her office when Richard followed. He didn't knock. Didn't ask. Just closed the door behind him and held up a printed photo. The same one from the university gala. "You were at Stanford 5 years ago." Name listed as Juliet Laurent. Not Lark. Juliet didn't flinch. She walked past him, set her bag down, and calmly removed her coat. "Not illegal to change your last name," she said. "Especially when you're trying to outrun it." Richard dropped the file on her desk. "This entire time, you've been pretending to be someone you're not." She finally looked at him. "No, Richard. I've been pretending to be the person you would trust." Silence. He stepped closer, voice low. "So what is this? Some undercover stunt for your father?" "For LarkCorp. It started that way," she admitted. "But it hasn't felt like that for a while. You manipulated your way into this company. I exposed corruption in your infrastructure team. I saved you from a $30 million audit scandal. If that's manipulation, then maybe you needed it." Her voice broke slightly, not with weakness, but something closer to exhaustion. "You want the full truth?" she asked. "I do." She moved around the desk, slowly, deliberately. "I came here to destroy you. That's what I was told to do." To infiltrate, expose, and destabilize Vale Industries from within. To bring it to its knees. He didn't move. Not even a breath. But then I met the man behind the empire. The man who reads too late into the night. The man who cares too much and pretends not to. The man who's been surviving his own legacy longer than I've been alive. She stepped closer, her voice now barely above a whisper. I came here with a weapon, Richard. But I never expected it to be my heart. He swallowed. Hard. For a second, they just stared at each other. Two people raised on power plays and family wars. Two people suddenly undone. You should go, he said quietly. Why? She asked. Because I'm not sure what I'll do if you stay. Juliet nodded, slowly. She walked to the door, opened it, and turned back. I didn't come here to fall for you. But I think I did anyway. And then she was gone. That night, Richard sat alone in his office, staring at the glowing skyline. She'd laid down her cards. Risked everything. But his world had never been safe for honesty. Still, for the first time, he wished it was. Meanwhile, Juliet stepped into a black car 2 blocks away. Andrea was already inside. You told him, she said. Juliet nodded. You just ruined everything. Juliet stared out the window. Or maybe. I finally stopped lying. The next morning, Juliet arrived at Vale Industries to silence. No nods from the reception desk. No polite smiles from the admin team. Just cold glances and whispers. Something had shifted. When she reached her office, the key card didn't work. She tried again. Access denied. Before she could call security, Daniel Crest appeared in the hallway. Juliet, he said, voice tight. You'll need to come with me. She followed him down 2 floors in silence. They entered a smaller conference room, glass walls, no shadows to hide in. Inside, Richard. Standing. Waiting. A single manila folder in his hand. He didn't greet her. Didn't sit. Last night, he said quietly, someone from the Lark Group leaked a financial memo. My internal projections for the Walker acquisition. Juliet blinked. I didn't. He raised a hand. I believe you. That stopped her cold. But the board doesn't. They voted to suspend all merger talks. Your access is being revoked. And starting tomorrow, you're no longer allowed on site. The room spun slightly. She opened her mouth. You just said you believed me. I do, he said. But this company doesn't run on belief. He handed her the folder. Inside, her resignation. Predated. Signed, sealed, and waiting for her name. You had this ready, she whispered. He looked away. I had to. Juliet backed up a step. You said I should go. I didn't think you'd throw me out. This isn't about us, he said, almost painfully. It's about keeping the roof from collapsing. She stared at the paper. Everything she'd fought for, erased in one decision. She placed the folder on the table. Untouched. I won't sign it, she said. I don't need your signature. Then she turned and walked out, head high, heart unraveling. That night, Juliet returned to her father's estate for the first time in over a year. He was waiting in the library. Well, he said without looking up, seems you finally come home. I'm not staying, she said. He raised an eyebrow. You were fired. You're back. Let's not pretend this wasn't inevitable. She dropped the unsigned resignation on his desk. I didn't leak anything, she said. And I didn't fail. He just chose fear over truth. Her father studied her. So you fell in love with him. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Meanwhile, Richard sat alone in his penthouse. No headlines. No celebration. No closure. Just the empty feeling that he'd lost something that hadn't even finished becoming real. He didn't pour the scotch this time. He just sat there, staring at her empty chair across the table. 3 days later, Vale Industries faced its worst crisis in a decade. The leak Juliet was blamed for? It triggered a chain reaction. LarkCorp pulled out of 2 satellite contracts. Stock fell 17%. And an anonymous whistleblower claimed Vale Industries had been inflating quarterly numbers. Richard sat in a war room with Daniel and 3 PR reps, fielding chaos by the hour. This wasn't Juliet's doing, Daniel said. She had nothing to gain by tanking the company. She was our firewall, Richard muttered. And I cut her out. That night, Juliet was in a hotel downtown, halfway through packing when the knock came. She opened the door and froze. It wasn't her father. It was Emily Vale, Richard's sister, 27. Fierce. Uninvited. You don't know me, Emily said, stepping inside. But I know exactly who you are. And right now, I don't care what my brother did. I need your help. Juliet raised an eyebrow. Why would you think I'd lift a finger? Because you love him, Emily said. And whether you want to admit it or not, he's drowning. Juliet didn't respond. Emily dropped a flash drive on the dresser. Everything that's happening? It's not coming from the outside. It's internal. Someone high up. Juliet looked down at the drive. You've got 48 hours before the board removes him. You said you weren't here to destroy him. Prove it. The next morning, Juliet walked through the Vale Industries lobby in silence. Security paused. Then let her through. Daniel was waiting. I didn't call you, he said. You didn't have to, she replied. Your building is bleeding. By noon, she was back in the boardroom. Not as a guest. Not as an infiltrator. As the only person with a plan. She pulled up the company's internal access logs and traced the source of the financial leak. It wasn't her. It wasn't even LarCorp. It was Graham West, Richard's oldest friend and CFO. He'd been leaking projections to a third-party buyer poised to take over after Vail crumbled. The betrayal landed like a bomb. Later that evening, Juliet stood outside Richard's office. He looked up when she entered. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I'm not here to fix things," she replied. "Then why?" "I'm here because I found who tried to burn your legacy down. And it wasn't me." She handed him the folder. Their eyes locked. "You believed the wrong person," she added softly. He opened the file, and everything shifted. The next morning, the headlines changed. CFO Graham West resigns amid corporate espionage scandal. Whistleblower revealed. Juliet Lark exonerated. Vail Industries saved by former rival heiress. But inside the building, it didn't feel like victory. Richard hadn't spoken to Juliet since she delivered the folder. He hadn't thanked her. Hadn't called. She understood why. Some betrayals don't land when the blade enters. They land when the one holding the knife turns out to be someone you wanted to trust. At 4 p.m., she walked into his office. He was standing by the window, Chicago skyline burning gold behind him. "You saved my company," he said quietly, without turning. "No," she replied. "I just stopped someone else from finishing what I started." He finally looked at her. "I was wrong," he said. She nodded. "So was I." Another pause. Then, softly, "You still don't trust me." "I do," he said. "That's the problem." Her breath caught. He walked toward her, stopping just a few feet away. "You made me feel something I didn't think I could anymore. That wasn't strategy. That was real." Juliet swallowed. "Then why does it still feel like the end?" "Because it has to be," he said. "For now." 3 weeks later, Juliet stood at the opening of the Grace Initiative, a nonprofit job training center for women leaving corporate abuse and economic hardship. She didn't mention Vail Industries in her speech. She didn't need to. People knew. They always know. Richard didn't attend, but he sent a single envelope. Inside, a check, large enough to fund the program for a year. No name attached. Just a typed note. "Sometimes you have to burn down the old world to build something worthy. Keep building. R." She folded it slowly, pressed it to her chest for just a second, then handed it to her assistant. "Deposit it," she said. "Let's start phase 2. In time, Juliet's name became its own legacy. Not as a lark, not as a Vail, but as herself. And when Richard finally appeared again, quietly, at the back of a job fair she hosted in Wicker Park, she didn't rush to him. She walked. Slowly. Deliberately. Like she'd already survived every war they could possibly bring to each other. And when she reached him, she didn't say hello. She just whispered, "Let's stop surviving. Let's build something real." He smiled and took her hand, not like a businessman closing a deal, but like a man finally letting go of every lie that kept him from living.